I welcome everyone to the Washington County Supportive Housing Services Pre-Proposers Conference. At this time, I'm just admitting all of the folks that are joining on this virtual meeting. So please bear with me as everyone joins. And if you could also put yourself on mute.
Hi, this is...
Sí, muy buenas tardes a todos. Bienvenidos a la propuesta de vivienda o la reunión para la propuesta de vivienda. Mientras estamos admitiendo a las personas, y por favor, a medida que entran, pueden ponerse en modo mudo y ya dentro de unos minutitos vamos a empezar. Muchas gracias.
All right, welcome once again, everyone, for joining us for today's meeting. It is a pre-proposal conference presentation about the RFPQ for supportive housing services. I want to ask folks if you could keep your mics on mute. And also turning off your video depending on your own preference. When we get to the question phase of the meeting, I would like to ask folks to raise your hand. And once you've raised your hand, I will put you into a queue in the chat box. And when you are speaking, if you could go ahead and unmute yourself. And turn on your video. And if you have any other accommodations that you need, please send me a direct message in the chat box.
Sí, muy buenas tardes a todos. Muchas gracias por haberse presentado y estamos aquí para una propuesta de servicios de apoyo para vivienda por parte del condado. A medida que estamos admitiendo a las personas, por favor, manténganse en modo mudo o por favor apaguen sus micrófonos y entonces, y también apaguen sus cámaras. A medida de que prosigamos, van a tener preguntas, entonces va a haber al final un momento para hacer preguntas y respuestas y en ese momento tú vas a poder hacer sus preguntas.
And all our meeting materials today can be made available in other languages. We have our one-pager and the PowerPoint presentation available in both English and Spanish and can accommodate other languages as requested.
El material presentado hoy puede hacerse disponible en otros idiomas y entonces también la presentación y las diapositivas también van a estar disponibles en otros idiomas.
All right, with that, I would like to introduce Comey Colivor. He's the Executive Director of the Housing Authority of Washington County. Comey has been the director since 2018. He has experience both working in the Portland area for Home Forward, which is formerly the Portland Housing Authority, as well as Prosper Portland, which was formerly the Portland Development Commission. So with that, I will turn it over to Comey. If you go ahead and unmute yourself and turn on your video, and you'll have our first presentation.
Thank you, Ty. Thanks for the reminder to unmute myself. I've been known to start talking without muting. Well, thank you for joining us today, everybody. On behalf of us at Washington County, we are eager to begin the work of implementing the Supportive Housing Services Program. Should I continue? Interpreter?
Yes, continue, please. We're working on having interpretation simultaneous. So just as we work in the background, we will make the channel available. Sí, muy buenas tardes para todos, por favor. Estamos teniendo unas fallas técnicas, así que vamos a tener la interpretación simultánea. Un momentito y ya seguimos, ya lo vamos a habilitar dentro de un poquito. Okay, please continue.
All right. Yeah, we know we can only do this work with a robust, diverse, and a dedicated network of service providers. That is all of you. Our staff have been working diligently to prepare the first procurement process. This is the RFPQ, or Request for Programmatic Qualifications. They are prepared to tell you all about what it is and how it will work. Essentially, it is our first step towards building a system of care that is equitable, accessible, effective, and creates a stable housing for our community members who need it most. Washington County is one of the most diverse counties in the state. That is 1/3 of the population being Black, Indigenous, Latino, Latina, Latinx, Asian, Pacific Islanders. The housing crisis disproportionately impacts this community. And the Supportive Housing Services Program gives us the opportunity and the responsibility to lead with race and work towards racial equity with housing solutions. This SHS measure approved by voters last year is game-changing. This is because of its regional investment nature to address homelessness and also the need to change the way we operate here in Washington County also. This means lifting up small, emerging, and culturally specific organizations to fully participate in the work of delivering care. It also means we are holding ourselves and one another to higher standards. This process aims to be transparent, accessible, and equitable. This is how we create an open door to build new and support existing partnerships. We also expect our partners to commit to standards of care, equitable practices, housing first, and trauma-informed models, and deliver equitable outcomes through your services. We've all got a big job ahead, and we are grateful that you are here with us, ready to join arm in arm and get started. As I turn it over to Ty to continue facilitating our meeting here today, I want to send a big thank you out to the wonderful staff of the Office of Equity and Inclusion and Community Engagement. A big shout out also to the Department of Health and Human Services. And last but not the least, the Department of Housing Services. We're all working together and collaborating to move this work forward. Thank you. Muchas gracias.
Thank you. At this time, I will proceed with the agenda, reviewing the agenda. So we will be covering these topics, a little bit of the history of the background for the Supportive Housing Services Program, the Supportive Housing Program Services Program overview, the RFPQ, which stands for Request for Programmatic Qualifications overview, the RFPQ application and quality review, and links and other RFPQ timelines. With that, I will turn it over to our team that's here today. We have Josh Kreitz, the Department of Housing Services Assistant Director, Jess Larson, Washington County Housing Services and Supportive Housing Services Program Manager, and Alex Devon, the Washington County Housing Services and Supportive Housing Services Services Network Administrator. So with that, I will turn it over to our first presenter from Supportive Housing Services, Jess Larson. And if you would go ahead, Jess, unmute yourself, and you can just give me a cue on when you'd like the next slide to move forward.
Super. Thank you, Ty. Good afternoon. Thank you, Comey, for that warm welcome. Ty, for your work here in preparing and convening us. It's a pleasure to be with you all. I can't see you, but I can see that there's almost 50 of us gathered here. So I'm just really grateful for the time you're all taking in your very busy work days to learn more about this important first step in building our services network that are going to help us implement this game-changing program. So as Ty explained, my job here with you today is just to get us grounded, to give us some background. Comey's already given us some of that, but I'll walk through some of these talking points here, or these slide points, so that we're squarely grounded in where we begin this work. And then our brand new colleague, I'm excited to introduce you all to Alex Devon, will take over the latter part of our presentation and go deeper into the specifics of the RFPQ application itself. And then we just want to make sure you're all clear that we have plenty of time for questions and answers at the end of our brief staff presentation here today. So, as you recall, almost a year ago, voters approved this game-changing measure in the Portland metro area, comprising of the 3 counties, not the entire 3 counties, but to invest in the supportive housing services program with 2 new taxes. It passed with over 58% of voter support. And here we are after almost a year of building out our teams and our partnerships, collaborating together with our local implementation plan, getting ready to actually implement this program. So the measure itself was, of course, built and championed by a broad coalition, and many of those who were around that table building the measure are here with us around this table, getting ready to implement it. And just as a quick point of update while I'm going through this background, I bring to you good news. This morning, your Washington County team was at the Regional Oversight Committee presenting our local implementation plan to that committee, and they unanimously approved it or recommended it for approval to the Metro Council. So we're moving that work forward as well, just as we're getting ready to do this great procurement work. So back to the measure, it is game changing, and we say that a lot because the resources it makes possible are scaled to functionally achieve functional zero in chronic homelessness in our region. That means be able to build out a system of care that can be responsive to anyone who is experiencing chronic homelessness or at risk of homelessness, chronic homelessness immediately, and help those individuals seek and get on their pathway to supportive housing immediately. And we will only do this, and we will all do this in partnership with Clackamas and Multnomah counties to achieve functional zero in chronic homelessness across the region. To date, it's the largest known investment in ending homelessness in the country. So again, it is nothing short of game changing. We estimate that we will be growing our Washington County continuum of care investments from roughly $15 million to nearly $100 million in the next couple of years. So that is the scale of growth in front of us, our learning curve in front of us, and we're all on this journey together. All right, next slide, please. Ty, then can you advance the slide? There we go. Wonderful. So again, as a point of reminder, the focus of the measure is to address homelessness specifically, and especially people experiencing or at risk of experiencing chronic homelessness. So this slide lays out those priority populations, A and B. They are local definitions similar to the definition of chronic homelessness and regular homelessness, if you will, but it's a local definition that is broader and free of some of the limitations of the federal definition. So essentially, the measure aims to commit 75% of its resources, its program resources, to serving priority population A, and that is people with disabilities, who are experiencing or at risk of experiencing prolonged homelessness and also have extremely low incomes. And then 25% of the resources are intended to serve the priority population B, and that would be essentially everyone else experiencing homelessness or at risk of homelessness. That could be people who are not extremely low income, people who don't have disabilities, people who have been temporarily experiencing homelessness or are at risk. And that is sort of the everyone else or priority population B. And above all, and underpinning all of this work is a commitment and a responsibility to implement the program while leading with race, ensuring that we are rectifying racial disparities in our service systems and disparities in our outcomes throughout our community. By ensuring that housing outcomes by people served through this program are better for Black, Indigenous, Latinx, Latino, Latina, Asian, and Pacific Islander populations. Next slide, please. So as we move into the RFPQ, we sometimes think about the various kinds of services that will need to be deployed to achieve those outcomes, to achieve that goal of functional zero in ending homelessness, and to serve our priority populations A and B, and to lead with race while doing it all. So these are 5 different buckets of services, if you will, and you'll see them spelled out in the RFPQ. But essentially what this request for programmatic qualifications sets out to do is it initiates our very first step in ensuring a transparent, equitable, and accountable procurement process, an opportunity for opening a big wide door to welcome in our new service provider partners who will work in partnership with Washington County to implement this program. So it's our process for seeking qualified suppliers is the technical term you'll see throughout the application process. But essentially it's the process for registering your organization's interest in being a service provider as a part of the supportive housing services program. And so those services that will be provided through the supportive housing services program and our programmatic components of this described in the RFPQ are these 5 buckets. We understand that many of our organizations in Washington County and across the region do many of these things. You may do all of these kinds of services. You may do some of them. You may do one of them, but desire to do more. And you may also just do one and only desire to do one. And all of these options are good and okay, and make you an eligible and a desired partner in service provision. So I'll just walk through the 5 buckets quickly because we're going to have more discussion about that later in the presentation with Alex. So those 5 services areas that we're seeking partners to provide services through the supportive housing services program and become qualified suppliers are outreach and engagement services, the work of working with people where they are at in the midst of their homelessness to help bring them in the doors towards services, as well as shelter and transitional housing programs, those programs that provide emergency-based services or short-term time-limited housing as a component of programming to help people towards permanent supportive housing. Housing navigation, placement, and eviction prevention services. These are all the services that help people in the midst of a housing search or to prevent homelessness in the first place. So all of those services to overcome barriers, find landlords, get applications approved, the move-in costs, the rent assistance to prevent eviction, all of those services are in that 3rd bucket. Then there is the next bucket of services we call supportive housing stabilization services. So these would be the services that are provided to ensure housing stability after the housing navigation and placement or eviction prevention happens. The work that happens to help people stay in their supportive housing. These services are sometimes site-based or building-based, like they're a part of an affordable housing building operation, such as resident services. And sometimes they are community-based or mobile stabilization services, often called retention workers, for example. And then we have the last bucket, which we are calling the wraparound supports. These are the maybe not so focused on housing stabilization, but the general supports that help support people, households towards their well-being. These can be employment programs, peer support programs, educational attainment programs, and more. So this is how we're breaking up the service components for the application of the RFPQ. And we want to stress that we understand it's not so easy for each organization to bucket these services in the way in the approach that you deliver the programs that you do. And so we'll describe later how the application will allow for you to apply for multiple program components if that's your desire. Next slide, please. So it's important to stress what we're not including in this request for programmatic qualifications for services. So the long-term rent assistance, which will be a critical component of our success with the Supportive Housing Services Program. And for all of you making applications to provide navigation services, for example, or supportive housing services, you will be working very closely with the long-term rent assistance as a voucher and a tool that you use to help people get housed. But the administration of long-term rent assistance will be done in Washington County by our housing authority partners who deliver long-term rent assistance already through the federal program. So we're going to be building upon that existing capacity to streamline the implementation of long-term rent assistance. So again, I want to stress that many of the organizations and programs that you will ultimately be running through supportive housing services will use and quickly and easily access long-term rent assistance vouchers, or RLRA, the regional long-term rent assistance. But this RFPQ is not for the purpose of delivering or administering that service. Also, we want to clarify that this RFPQ is not seeking technical assistance or training or any other consultant work. That will also be a critical component of our supportive housing services program, but we will be leaning on the RFPQ that was already conducted by Multnomah County to build out a pool of providers to provide those technical assistance capacities throughout the system. Furthermore, we're aware that many of you, many organizations are going to need and will seek capacity building investments to get your organization up and capable of becoming future service providers. And again, supportive housing services will be making these capacity building investments throughout our future system of service providers, especially focusing on building out capacity for culturally specific service providers. And this RFPQ is not that moment of application for those future capacity building investments. That will be a later step. And then finally, to clarify that the RFPQ is not a moment in time for our other governmental partners to make applications for provision of services. Of course, we will be working with our city partners and other departments to coordinate the provision of services, but this procurement process is for the county to embark in contracting relationships ultimately with non-governmental entities. Okay, next slide, Ty. And then the last item for me to review with you all today is just to kind of go over our expectations in the supportive housing service program of our future service provider partners, our future qualified suppliers for supportive housing services. We will expect all providers to be joining us in a commitment to delivering services from a foundation of racial equity, to be working with us to advance racial equity and our outcomes, to be describing how your work is grounded in racial equity approaches and more. So that is a first foundation and expectation of our future our system of care and all of our partnering organizations. Next, we will be also expecting all organizations to join us in committing to culturally responsive services. So we will all go through training and ongoing work to ensure that our service provision is in fact culturally responsive for all organizations, and also learning to partner with and commit to the provision of culturally specific services for individuals who need and desire culturally specific services. We also expect all of our service delivery approaches to include a housing first model, to be led with the understanding that housing is first and foremost the solution to homelessness, and we build out the wraparound supports and other strategies around that expectation that everyone needs a home, and if we can work towards housing stability, we can work towards addressing the other complex needs of the household as well. And then other evidence-based service delivery approaches that will be expected in components of our programs will be low barrier and harm reduction approaches, and trauma-informed care and person-centered approaches. Many of these are discussed at length in our local implementation plan and also described in the RFPQ. But we just want to be clear as we begin here today and invite you all to consider making an application with this RFPQ to become, again, qualified suppliers as our part of our network with the SHS program, that these are our expectations of what that means and how we will be delivering care in Washington County through the Supportive Housing Services program. Okay, well, now it's my great privilege and pleasure to introduce you all to our newest team member, Alex Devin. I think this might be your first introduction to him for many. He's just been here for a week. He's joining us, recently moved here from the LA area after working in the LA Continuum of Care, or LASA, for many years. So he's bringing great experience from that continuum care, and we're excited to bring him aboard. And I'm excited to turn it over to him now and give you all the chance to meet him. Alex, take it away.
Thanks, Jess. Hi, everybody. My name is Alex Devin. I am the New Systems Network Administrator for Washington County, AKA me and the team I'll be working with will be your primary points of contact for a lot of the contracting, programming, technical assistance, and assistance with the day-to-day operations of the programming. So I'm really happy to be here, and I'm glad to kind of meet you virtually in these little boxes. Next slide, please, Ty. So we'll get into the fun stuff, or for some of us, definitely the scary stuff. So some of the contractual requirements for working with Washington County are going to be some fiscal requirements. Those fiscal requirements would essentially be creating a budget with us, in proper invoicing of your expenditures on a monthly basis. Maybe every other month. We're still ironing out a lot of the logistics, working with the allocations planning, and ensuring that you're spending down. We will be working with our providers, probably on a quarterly basis, to ensure that if you're burning hot, that we can assist you with that, and if you're burning cold and we need to shift funds around to ensure that you at the end of your fiscal year your coffers have zero. That is something that's really important. We want to be utilizing every dollar we get as effectively as possible. One of the other things we would be looking at is insurance requirements. I left these relatively broad. I didn't want to, scare the pants off of anybody, essentially, but we will be working with you on, making sure that your organization's insurance requirements are, in compliance with working with a county organization. We will be helping you with those things. Data management, the utilization of the homeless management information system. All of these services are going to need to be recorded. We as funders have funders above us, obviously, and that we need to be accountable to. And so, the plugging the data into the information system timely and with good data quality is very, very important for the practice of these programs. Coordinated entry or utilization of the Community Connect. We want to be building out on the existing infrastructure that the system has. So we want our programs to be in alignment with the Community Connect model or the coordinated entry model. Some of the other contract requirements are your performance measures. Examples of performance measures for, say, shelter could be occupancy rates for the beds. We want to ensure that, if we're funding you for 20 beds, that we have bodies in those beds, and that, resources are being utilized, and they're being utilized effectively. We will, we'll create performance measures that are reasonable, and then hopefully, push them forward a little bit each year incrementally as we grow as a system and we get better and better at what we do. Every year, we're all going to get better and better at this, as long as we're working together. One of the other things we want to look at is pay equity. We want to ensure that the case managers, the staff, the persons that we are hiring to do this work on the front end, the boots on the ground, are getting good competitive wages. We will be allocating funds to our providers to allow you to trickle down to pay in an equitable and fair fashion. And there is definitely going to be an expectation that the money that is being given to the providers is being used to pay those wages in a very fair and equitable way. You get what you pay for, and we want to have good people on the front lines that feel like they're being taken care of, because then they're going to do the work that needs to be done, and they're going to be willing to do whatever it takes. And we really want to have a do whatever it takes model with the service delivery. And then contract monitoring. One of my least favorite things to say is, the contract monitoring process. But lucky for you, the same team that will be working with you on contracting will be working with you on technical assistance, will be the same people that will be working with you on your contract monitoring. So you won't be getting hit with any surprises. It's not going to be some test that you didn't get the notes for before the test. Your contracts will have everything laid out for you, hopefully very clearly and in a way where what your expectations are, so that when we are monitoring the work you're doing, that you don't feel surprised, that you can go into it feeling confident, you can feel like going into it comfortably, that this is a partnership between us and you. It's not an adversary relationship. We want to grow and build a very strong partnership together. Let me check. I saw you putting some notes in the chat. Was that for me or was that for later?
We can save that question for later. I just want to make sure it's there.
What are some of the outcome goals? Yeah, and we'll be working on a lot of those outcome goals, but I will say that I put some links in the PowerPoint for our plan, and the baseline goals for our continuum are in that plan. So that is always a helpful link to refer back to. Like we part of it is the first year we made a commitment to house 500 people. So that would be an outcome measure that we're taking on as a whole continuum with this process moving forward. Next slide, Ty. So once again, we are seeking a diverse range of service providers, AKA we want you to be a provider for this service. We really bad. We really want you to come together with us to do this work, and we want everybody at the table. The more diverse group of organizations we have, definitely the better. Homeless response is not a one size fits all, and we want to make sure that we have a familiar face with every participant that we're out there serving. We're looking for community-based service providers. A lot of you providers that have been working on shoestring budgets for many years, we want to help lift you up to provide the services you've already been providing, and help boost that up to the next level. Affordable housing owners and operators, we need units. And so, being able to partner with you organizations with your units, and then bringing in supportive services would be very paramount. Outreach organizations, shelter and transitional housing providers, behavioral health and community health providers. We want to provide all the wraparound and ancillary services necessary. It's not just about getting keys in somebody's hand, but it's about increasing their quality of life and creating stability once those keys are in hand, so that we don't have to see them walking into the front door again. somebody walks into an access center or works with an outreach worker, we get them indoors. We don't want them to ever have to go back to that access center or go back to that outreach worker unless they're going back to do some peer support work or give back or volunteer because they're super grateful for the work you got to do with them getting into housing. And that also goes with the provide of wraparound services and supports. We also want to bring on as many faith-based organizations as possible. We want to help you all grow. You've been doing great work. Every community I've been in has had a veritable cornucopia of great faith-based organizations, and we want to ensure that we can bring you into the fold and get you contracted and have you continue to provide those services with us for the people that we're serving. Next slide, please. So part of the RFPQ process is to get a qualified pool of I cannot say that word today, service providers, aka when you complete the application, the RFPQ, when you pass, you get put onto a larger list. We will be tapping into that list to put out more contracts, expansion contracts, and those services moving forward. Service allocations conducted following the RFPQ approval. So basically, once you've been approved, we want to get you moving as soon as possible so we can allocate these funds out and start getting people moved inside as soon as possible. This first year, we're anticipating to allocate up to $20 million in services that will increase year to year. But we also need to take into account that items like, financial assistance are going to compound every year. So if we spend, $20 million on financial assistance this year and we double our goals next year, that essentially means we'll be needing to provide $40 million in rental assistance next year to meet the next, 500. So it will grow and grow and grow. So there will be some probably more supportive services, in the first year and the second year as we, scale up this programming. Once you've been approved through the RFPQ process, you will be qualified through the 2024-2025 funding year. So you won't have to apply again, essentially, which is lovely. So, take your time on this application packet because this is the one which will put you, in the list as a qualified service provider for the next 3 years. And all this work is done as a partnership with Clackamas and Multnomah County. So we're not doing this in a vacuum. We're not an island in Washington County. And so we're trying to align the things that make the most sense in aligning as well. At the same time, keeping regional differences at the forefront and making sure that we're, utilizing services that make the most sense for the neighborhoods they're being served in. Next slide, please. All right, so I will get into the proposal application. So it is a narrative application. If you've had a chance to review the RFPQ, I put some links at the end of this presentation. Please use the links. They're very helpful. I would also recommend, resources like the National Alliance to End Homelessness to help you with some of the, the best practices that are seen in the community. I continue to propose projects that are meaningful to your organization, but use the backbone of best practices and evidence-based practices that are found throughout the country, throughout your proposal, to really solidify and give it a solid foundation. So the first 2 pages are an organization's mission and capacity. Talk about your organization. What's your mission? How much have you grown? How much can you grow? What's reasonable that first year? What are your objectives? What does your staff look like? Are they part of the community? Are you hiring a lot of the people that you've served? Do you have peer support in your organization? You want to talk about all those things within organizational mission and capacity. Equity and inclusion. How are you utilizing equity and inclusionary strategies within your organization? It's very similar to the first bullet point, but be as thorough as possible All those examples are great, right? Do you have a lived experience group? Is there somebody on your board that, you know, has lived experience that helps make organizational decisions from the top down? How are you doing that work? Third would be the service delivery. How does your organization deliver those services? And then the fourth one, which I find to be the most fun of all of them, is really, you know, you pitching your program. You know, what are you going to do? How are you going to do it? And this part is really, really nice. I would recommend that you like look at those links. We've made commitments as a continuum over the next year. I referenced one of them earlier that was 500 placements. So as you're talking about a lot of these really great ancillary, you know, activities that you provide, always put it on a foundation or a backbone that we've made commitments as a county to our funder for the next year. So you always want to like use that as your foundation, that we're going to do A, B, and C, but this directly associates with getting this many people placed over the course of the next year. You really want to tie in our outcomes as a county with, you know, your outcomes and your programming that you're proposing in your narrative. Also in this section, so you have 2 pages max per component. Jess talked earlier, sometimes, you know, like you're not differentiating between your shelter services and your housing navigation. That's fine. In your narrative, you can blend them. You can talk about how, you know, once somebody comes into the shelter bed, then you're going to be creating, you know, like you're going to be getting the document ready. You're going to be starting the housing search. You're going to be creating your, you know, the stability plans with them. And then once you move them inside, you're going to transition. You're going to give them somebody that's going to be providing support. You're going to, you know, utilize a peer support structure. You want to utilize a peer support structure where, you know, people that have been placed can, you know, do a work program with you and come in and do case management for people that are newly placed as a peer support to help them feel more comfortable. If you want to tie all these things together in a really eloquent and beautiful program model, please do that. Like, or you can be one, right? Like we just want to do, you know, shelter services. That's fine. Just, you know, then you can focus your 2-page narrative on the shelter services you want to provide and how you want to provide those services. Yes, Rodolfo put in a question, where would applicants state record history of past existing strategic partnerships? And that would go in the service delivery section. So yes, any of your community partnerships, how you've been using Community Connect, one hand washes the other. How are you working with the other providers in your community to, you know, effectively do those partnerships? You really want to, we would want you to talk about that in the service delivery section. Thank you for bringing that up, Rodolfo. I appreciate it. Next slide, please, Ty. So in your RFPQ, we gave you this evaluation criteria. So, you know, everything is very transparent. It's all up front. 4 sections, 25% per section. You must receive a 70% for contracting. Don't go into this feeling too nervous. Just remember, we at Washington County want you to be our provider. We're expecting that we're going to be providing technical assistance. We're expecting that we're going to need to help. Some of you are going to need more help than others. Some of you might not need a lot of help at all, and that's fine. We understand that. We're going into that with that mindset. So as long as, you know, you're putting the honest, good programming you want to do in here, there shouldn't be a problem. We just really do want to bring you in. So, you know, please review this in your RFPQ. Like I said, we put the links and some helpful links in the back, and I would also recommend National Alliance. There's other helpful websites that can help you with some of the, you know, the verbiage, some of the practices that'll help kind of like beef up your application packet. Next slide, please, Ty. All right, timeline, since we are already in the thick of it. So the RFPQ was released on April 19th. I hope that popped into your inbox and you got really excited. So the first proposers conference was today. The second one is in 2 days. We will allow, we're gonna have a questions and answer section at the end. Like you, we're also building this ship as we're starting to float it. So if we can't answer all the questions today, We're going to post responses. We're going to work internally to make sure that we have responses and that they're submitted outward to everybody. We'll also give you a little additional time if this isn't the best format for you to answer questions, or you need to digest it, or you're like me and you realize you have questions at 3 o'clock in the morning and there's nobody there to listen to you. So that would be the time you can write them down. In the morning you can submit the questions to us, and we can add that to the responses that we submit on the 7th. So don't feel that you need to ask anything right now. You can get in a little bit more in the weeds afterwards, and we can add those to the questions and the answers that we submit. All right, and then after that, then it's on you to do your writing and make that beautiful proposal for us. The deadline for that would be May 19th, when all of the submissions are due. Once that's done, we will be evaluating. We have a very large and diverse set of evaluators throughout the county who will be reviewing these proposals. They will be looking through them and using the same scoring rubric that is in the RFPQ, so there should be absolutely zero surprises. And then on June 4th, we will post our qualified supplier list. If you are on that qualified supplier list, then you will know that you've cut the mustard. You get to work with us, or as I get to see, I get to work with you. And then that's when the fun really begins. And then July 1st, we will start contracting. And we will hit the ground running, and hopefully we're gonna wow everybody in the surrounding counties and our community with the great work we're doing. I'm really excited. I think we're gonna make a big splash. Next slide, please, Ty. All right, and like I said, here's the helpful links. Here's the RFPQ. Here's the Washington County Local Implementation Plan. Please reference the implementation plan. It literally says everything you need to know. Like, you can regurgitate a lot of the information on that implementation plan within your proposals and really use it as a baseline for, what do I want to do? I want to do A, B, and C, but I know that it needs to be founded on housing placements. So tie the placements in first, and then start weaving the really cool ancillary things that your organization does within that model, so that we can really boost you up doing what you do while still meeting the commitment that we've made to Metro to move forward. And then also there's the Metro work plan. It's a great reading, and it should really help you with your application packets. Next slide, if there is one. And look at that. We moved through this relatively seamlessly. Didn't hurt me one bit. Hopefully you're not in pain at all either. So I'm gonna give it back to Ty so he can help MC some of the questions and answers.
Great, thank you so much, Alex, and thank you, Jess, also for presenting. At this time, we're going to open the floor for questions. Please raise your hand using the emoji, which you should be able to find at the bottom of your screen, or you can go ahead and drop the chat questions in chat. I'll start a queue and do the best that I can to update that queue, and I will call on those individuals one at a time. And when you are called, please just unmute your mic, turn on your camera, and then you go ahead and proceed and ask your question. If I miss your hand, please just remind me. It's not intentional, but we'll do our best to try and keep a little bit of order with the questions. So go ahead and raise your hands if you have questions, and I'll just start adding a queue together. And there were a few questions I know that were posted, so we can maybe start with those. There was a question I received. What are the outcome goals for the supportive housing services? Or yeah, what are the outcome goals does supportive services have?
Ty, I'll jump in to try to help answer that question. I think a great place to look, as Alex was referencing, is the outcome metrics required and listed out specifically in the Metro work plan. They mainly include housing placement and housing stability over time, and racial equity outcomes, or outcomes measured by race and ethnicity, to ensure we are advancing racial equity. There are other elements to those outcome metrics, but ultimately we are measuring our success in implementing the supportive housing services measure by how we are helping people at risk of homelessness and experiencing homelessness get housed and stay housed.
Great. Here's another question in the chat from Marcia Hill. If we are selected as a provider, how will funding amounts be determined?
Great. That's an excellent question, Marcia, because that brings up a related question I wanted to make sure I anticipated. So we want to be clear here that this RFPQ does not result in contracts. It's the first step to essentially enroll your organization as an eligible entity for future contracting opportunities. And so then we will begin an allocation process, or frankly, several allocation processes for the different kinds of services. And also over time, we will do additional allocations as we are able to grow as a continuum of care and roll more resources out. So we don't have any specific allocation amounts specified at this point in time. We are only able to kind of communicate or project our goal to distribute as much as $20 million in services provision across the board of SHS services in the first year.
Great. I'm going to call on Marcella, and then we'll go back to some of the chat questions. So Marcella, go ahead.
Thank you. Again, my name is Marcela Alcantar, and I'm the president and founder of Taller ID. Taller ID is a nonprofit organization with focuses on Indigenous Mesoamerican. Typically, the Indigenous Mesoamerican gets confused or left behind within the Hispanic population. This year, the Federal Highways has the first time included Indigenous Mesoamerican as part of the Native American definition, or Indigenous now as the main group. And as that, my question is, you said that obviously this is a housing programmatic goals and missions, but we provide non-traditional healing for Indigenous populations. Is there a gap, or is there an opportunity to qualify in this service only, or do we need to team up with somebody to include those services as part of the housing services that are a large contractor or might supply what your main efforts are? Thank you.
Thank you, Marcella. That's an excellent question. I think it's probably relevant and meaningful for many other attendees of this Q&A session. So thank you. And Alex, I welcome you to add in here. But it sounds to me that your description of the services you are providing is an excellent example of what we might consider wraparound supports for households who are either working to get into housing or stay in housing and need those additional supports that relate to their well-being, if not specifically to their housing status, but still are critical supports, and therefore we call them wraparound supports that help ensure that housing stability over time. So yes, please apply. We welcome your application. And just quickly, it sounds like the wraparound supports component might be the right bucket for your consideration, but of course, that's for you to determine.
Yeah, I agree with Jess.
Well, while we have this pause and Ty, you're getting ready for the next question, I do want to mention that I am so grateful to our colleagues from the procurement office in Washington County who are here with us on this call. So we have both Susie Fulcher and Kirsten Angulo who are with the purchasing department. So if you have any questions about specifically Procure Now, how to get on, make your profile and get started with the application, they are here for that technical assistance too. And thank you to Kirsten and Susie for being here with us.
Great. We've received a question. If contracting begins on July 1, when are services expected to be implemented for year number 1?
I believe it is as soon as you're able to get up and running with those services. We understand that there will be a lot of hiring that needs to happen, a lot of training that needs to happen. We sort of tease that we all think we're going to summer school together for all of the various HMIS and culturally responsive care and you name it, we're all going to be going to the Summer Institute of SHS together. So, and probably beyond the summer. So we understand it's going to take time to build out the program. And we also know that there are providers and services and housing navigators out there already working with our community. And so we're going to immediately start serving them with SHS resources and housing vouchers as soon as we're able to. So I think the answer is as soon as possible. And we recognize it will take time.
Great. We received a question on page 1 and 9 of the RFPQ. It includes a question due date of May 7th. However, the timeline showed on the slides said the due date was April 30th. Could the county please confirm the question of due dates?
Well, that's really interesting. And I want to learn more about that conflict. My understanding is the application is open for a full month. So we opened it on Monday, the 19th, and we're expecting a deadline of May 19th. I think this item here says answers will be posted by May 7th. So we're wanting to make sure that if we receive questions, we're posting the answers to those questions. So applicants have enough time and with that information to meet the response deadline, which is May 19th. But let me know if I've misunderstood the question or if we have some information out there that we need to correct.
Next question, if an organization does not meet the minimum qualifications, will they have to wait until 2025 to reapply?
Thank you. That's also a very helpful question. So this is a good opportunity to stress. We see this as a screening in opportunity, not a screening out opportunity, and it's not competitive, right? We just need to ensure that all applications meet a minimum threshold of 70%. And so if an organization does not meet that minimum threshold, I think with the answers, I don't know. I expect that there will be future opportunities for opening up the RFPQ. There's also some sharing happening between the 3 counties. So as I described, we're sharing with Multnomah County's RFPQ for technical assistance. And they are sharing with us in this RFPQ, they are interested in being able to contract with service providers who become qualified through this RFPQ process in Washington County. So similarly, if future RFPQ processes open up in other counties, there might be some more mutual opportunities for sharing access to those other pools of qualified service providers. And also, I think it's very possible that we would consider opening up the pool again, perhaps on an annual basis, to allow additional organizations to make applications if they decide they want to expand their services to Washington County or didn't apply this time around and want to apply again in the future. So I don't expect that it would be a restricted pool for 3 years. I think there will be opportunities in the future to bring on additional providers.
Great. I have one hand raise. Oh, I see a second hand raise. We go with M. Caballero, and you can unmute yourself and go ahead and ask the question.
Hi, my name is Martha Caballero with Native American Rehabilitation Association. Hi, everyone. You sort of opened the door to my question. Earlier, you spoke about the collaborative efforts between the various counties, Clackamas and Multnomah, and you sort of touched on how you're going to work with Multnomah County. What is the collaborative efforts with Clackamas County?
Pardon me. That's a great question. Thank you, Martha. They are the same, similar kinds of sharing, of accessing each other's qualified pools of providers. Now, your question is well timed because at this very moment, Clackamas County also has an open procurement process. Theirs is a request for proposals, an RFP, so it's different. They are not going about it as a sort of pool of qualified service providers. They are going about it with the process that ultimately is going to be selecting specific contracts and engaging in specific program approvals. So it's a slightly different process. And if you are interested in providing services in Clackamas County, I would encourage your organization also to participate in that RFP because that's going to directly result in contracts different than this RFPQ process. However, there is the possibility that in the future Clackamas might say, oh, and we would like to do these additional services as well. We wonder who's out there in the qualified pools of suppliers with Multnomah and Washington counties, and they could inquire and then reach out to our qualified pool of suppliers for possible additional contracting opportunities. So I hope that it's like a both and, all of the above answer. But yeah. I wouldn't encourage anyone not applying for the Clackamas application.
So I think they came.
So pardon me, just to be clear, please apply for both if you are interested in providing services in both counties at this time.
Right, thank you. Thank you.
Hi, I'm going to go ahead and read Kelsey Anderson's question. And with a faith-based organization, we provided a shelter service in the past. We haven't decided if we will pursue further services, but thought we should become qualified to leave options open. However, I can only write about what we've provided in the past and not grand plans for the future. Is that appropriate or not? Not what you're looking for?
Yeah, no, that's perfectly appropriate. That is glorious. Please go for it. That would be wonderful.
Great. Now, I would like to invite Elise Schaff Labak to ask the question. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, my question was more or less already answered because we are with Family Promise of Tualatin Valley, and we straddle both Washington County and Clackamas County in terms of our service provider areas. So I think she pretty clearly answered that if we want to pursue funding from both sides or be a provider for both counties, that would be best to do both RFPs. So that was my question. Thank you.
Great. I'll read Kim Marshall's question. After the RFPQ process and evaluations, will there be another application process for specific program funds to being July 1, begin July 1, maybe?
Yeah, that's a great question, Kim. No. Once you've completed the RFPQ process, you will be a qualified vendor. And then we will, be reaching out based off of the global plan for the continuum to contract out services. We also are trying to ensure our best to spread the wealth as much as possible. So if you are proposing to do, 100 slots, and we look at the qualified pool of applicants and we want to disperse them all in an equitable fashion, we might come back to you and say, we can do 40 slots, or we can do 20 slots this first year. So, it's really going to be dependent on, the number of applicants that make threshold and, the services that they're all proposing. And that's when we would start the, discussion with you as an organization on moving forward with the contract.
Great. I'll read Brian Schimmel's question. Please confirm access to funds is through a reimbursement system. If so, will the county offer a cash flow advance 20 to 50K to CBOs that lack adequate cash flow to start?
A great question as well. And as we brought up earlier, that we're also building the boat at the moment, but we are definitely currently looking at strategies for advances. We're not sure if that will be a 30, 60, or 90-day advance, or what exactly that will look like, but we do want to ensure that you're not having to secure any lines of credit or put your organization in any forms of debt to launch out programming. We want to make sure that you have the appropriate funds in your coffers when you start moving forward, so you can hire up and do the infrastructure things necessary to get moving in your programming.
Great. So those are all the questions we've received thus far. If there are more questions, we have a few more minutes. Give folks a few seconds to get a chance to raise your hands, or you can go ahead and add your question to the chat box. Once again, I will say that we have seen some notes that Procure Now will take your questions. We can also receive questions at this shsinfo@co.washington.or.us as well. But I give folks the time if anyone else would like to ask questions. Otherwise, I'll turn it over to our team to wrap up. Okay, so we got one more question there. Who will be evaluating the RFPQ applications?
Yeah. Ty, would you like me to take that question?
Yes, please.
Okay. Thank you, Kim, for that question. Yes, we've been receiving recommendations from you and other folks interested in helping with the evaluation process for this RFPQ application. We're putting together teams of evaluators, both with our county staff across departments, also in partnership with other city staff. And then we're also seeking community-based partners who are not in any way, who aren't part of organizations making applications. So it'll be a diverse set of internal and partnering colleagues who make up teams of evaluators for this process. And we're still securing those folks. If you have recommendations, feel free to send them forward. And then we'll make that list known in the end.
Great. Any further questions? Going once, going twice. With that, I see Comey, you unmuted yourself. Maybe we can have you close this out, and just want to thank everyone as well for just attending. Thank you, and thank you, Comey.
Well, I want to thank you, Ty, for facilitating such a wonderful gathering here. I want to thank all the attendees and our team, Jess, Josh, Alex, and a lot more to come. So thank you all. We look forward to partnering and getting this work done. We appreciate your attendance here today. Great job.